So you think that manufacturing in Asia is a walk in the park? Everything is so nicely organized through Alibaba with insurance and good manufacturers. Then you should pay especially close attention to this video because you probably haven't made any of the 5 mistakes I'm going to go through with you today yet, but there's a huge chance that it could happen to you very soon. And in this video, we're talking about mistakes that can threaten your very existence, the 5 mistakes that will cost you the most in Asia. Because millions of companies source products from Asia, but most of them make critical mistakes that put their entire business at risk every year. And that is absolutely no exaggeration. We see this happening almost every single day here at Asiapro. Mistake number 1 is choosing your supplier based solely and exclusively on the lowest price. That means any supplier who offers you the best price is, in your eyes, potentially a good manufacturer. And that's exactly what's going to pull the rug out from under your feet. Because where, pray tell, does that good price actually come from? It doesn't just come out of thin air. It only comes about because the supplier either didn't understand what you wanted, so in the end you'll get the wrong product, or they cut the quality so much that you can't even sell it in Europe. At least not on Amazon, because there you can be sure you'll get 1 or 2 stars from your customers. Thanks to Asiapro, I know that the cheapest suppliers are the biggest nightmare. Because often you're not just negotiating with the manufacturer about the price, but especially about the quality. But, and this happens very often, you haven't even ended up with the manufacturer, but with a trading agency. And of course, they don't want to lose the deal. That means the manufacturer they actually intended for your production can't be used because you're pushing the price down too much, so they go with some cheap supplier instead. And you still believe that you're working with an exclusive manufacturer. Yeah, not a chance. You'll be the one who definitely gets left behind when it comes to quality, and then no one can help you anymore. Because once the quality has gone down the drain, what else can you do? At best, you might have Alibaba insurance that eventually kicks in, but you can already forget about the current shipment. And in the worst case, you miss out on the entire season. Imagine you're making Christmas trees, and then in August or September, whenever you absolutely have to have them shipped, you realize they're not green, they're blue because no one in the Chinese factory actually knows what a Christmas tree looks like. And then you've got a problem, right? Sure. You might be able to file a complaint with Alibaba, but you'll completely miss out on the Christmas business. And compensation for lost earnings, that's really just wishful thinking if you expect to get that from any Asian supplier or even a trading agency. I really love the saying, if you buy cheap, you buy twice. And that is precisely the way it is. Yeah, and you can't afford to buy twice. The margins in e-commerce are just way too small for that. You need a one-shot. That means you have to find a manufacturer who can deliver good quality at a reasonable, acceptable price. And then you can actually do business in e-commerce. And something you absolutely need to know, 73% of all middlemen pretend to be manufacturers, and you face double the cost risk if you make a mistake right at the start when choosing your suppliers. Actually, it's not just double the risk, you're basically dead in the water before your business even gets started. Because if you're a beginner and the production quality is poor, you won't achieve any rankings on Amazon. In the worst case, you might even face a product recall if your product contains concerning substances, and then it's game over for you. Yes, even with a limited liability company, you can run into problems. If, as the managing director, you don't carefully select the raw materials, you haven't fulfilled your duty of care, and then you're personally liable with your private assets. Not even a GmbH will protect you from that. So think about that before you always go for the cheapest manufacturer and sacrifice quality for it. That might not be the best move, but you've probably already picked up on that by now. Mistake number 2. I think I've talked about this 1,000 times already. It's unclear specifications. Yeah, if you want to have a power bank, you can't just go to the manufacturer, send them a link to an Amazon listing and say, hey, I want the same thing again. They have no idea what was actually built into that product. That's why it's important for you. If you want to work properly with a manufacturer, you really have to send them everything you have in terms of specifications. The material, the dimensions, the weight, which accessories are included. For a power bank, for example, how many milliamp hours does the battery really need to have? And above all, what kind of battery needs to be inside? A no-name Chinese battery that blows up in your customer's face after 2 charges on the kitchen table, or a real brand name battery that you can actually stand behind at the end of the day? Because if you don't brief every single detail precisely, the manufacturer has room for interpretation that you, as the customer, definitely don't want. This room for interpretation means that they'll try to use cheaper materials. If you just say, I need plastic, then he might not use REACH-compliant plastic, but instead some random plastic he can buy cheaply from another supplier to maximize his profit. Just like you need to maximize your profit, he also has to make sure he earns as much money as possible. That's legitimate, that's part of business, and if you don't specify things properly, then it's not the manufacturer's fault, it's your own personal problem. That's why you need documentation that is extremely precise. Drawings, materials, tolerances, packaging, everything you can think of. And you need samples. Pre-production samples, meaning production samples that you approve, that you confirm, and at the end of the day, the manufacturer simply makes a copy of that in mass production. That's the ideal situation. That is how things should normally be done, and it is also how we work with our clients at Asiapro. Without a confirmed pre-production sample, there cannot be any production. Anything else is kamikaze. This is a kamikaze mission for your business and for your money, not for the manufacturers. Because at the end of the day, you simply cannot rely on or hide behind Alibaba's insurance. If you don't provide a proper briefing, Alibaba will also say, sorry, you didn't mention that. Anything you don't specify, the manufacturer will decide on their own. And if you act so unprofessionally, sorry, but then you'll just have to pay a bit more money now. I don't wish that on anyone, so do it properly or come to Asiapro, we'll help you with it. The difference is huge. If you have a clear specification, you'll get a clear price. The supplier can't get out of it then. That way you'll also have proper Alibaba protection. Because if everything is clearly specified and the manufacturer still does their own thing, then it's not your problem. You can use the insurance option on Alibaba. If not, well then you just can't, right? And of course, you'll be upset if your production doesn't turn out the way you imagined. But no one's going to humor you or comfort you then. At that point, you'll have to fight with other means. So, another important tool is quality control. And maybe not just quality control at the end of production, like a pre-shipping quality inspection, but perhaps even quality control during production or even before production starts, so you can check the materials. Because hey, we're in Germany, or rather in Europe, we are required to use truly safe materials, and we also have to make sure of that, ideally with lab tests. That's why, especially when selecting materials, we need a prior laboratory test to ensure that everything is really in order. And this has to be ongoing every single time. What often happens is that if you don't announce a quality inspection, the pre-production sample, the sample itself, might be excellent, but the mass production ends up differing from it. That's simply because the manufacturer plays their card and thinks if he's not testing, then he's not interested in quality, so we'll just do things our own way. Then suddenly he starts changing the material, using untested materials. Yes, and especially if you don't have ongoing quality control, not even a final inspection before shipping, then no one can really help you anymore. Yes, and in that case, not even Alibaba can help you, and we at Asiapro would probably only be able to get you some kind of deal with a great deal of effort. Basically, it happens in several steps. The first is sample approval. That's the pre-production sample I explained to you in point number 2. You need to have that. Then the production process begins. And at that point, you could already test 10 to 20% of the raw materials the manufacturer has acquired. The stuff has to go to the lab anyway, but you have to ensure and verify that the goods sent to the lab are precisely the same materials being used in your product. When production is 50% complete, we temporarily halt the production lines and do an in-production inspection. That means we check, okay, what have we actually produced so far? Does it meet the specifications? If not, then we notice it early enough. Yeah, then all is not lost yet, and you haven't waited for the entire production cycle only to find out at the end, actually, I can't accept the goods at all. That would be really tough. Rejecting the production and maybe getting your money back, that's good, whether through Alibaba Insurance or Asiapro, we make all that possible. But not being able to sell because the goods simply aren't delivered, that's what's really expensive. Especially if you have seasonal goods, right? You can remember my Christmas tree example. And of course, there is the final quality control inspection right before the goods are actually shipped out and even before you make the final balance payment. Normally, the payment flow goes like this. You pay 30% upfront when you place the order. The manufacturer then uses that to buy the raw materials, and 70% is paid after the quality inspection has been successfully completed. The remaining money is transferred then and not before. And don't let yourself slip up here either. That's another important point. If the manufacturer says, yeah, you can go ahead and transfer the money, then we'll do the quality inspection and can ship the goods out faster. Don't do it, because once you've transferred the money, it becomes really difficult to get it back. Yeah, then you might end up not only with goods you can't accept. It doesn't make any sense even if you've paid 100%. If you realize that the goods can't be sold in Europe, then there's no point in importing them, because you'll also have to pay for shipping and at the end of the day be responsible for disposal in Germany or Europe. But then you've paid 100% and you might not have any capital left to order the same goods from another supplier. So it's better to wait until the quality control is completed and then make the payment step by step. The goods are shipped, everything's fine. I really love the cultural differences between Asia and Europe. It's a real challenge, and so many people make mistakes simply because they don't understand that Asians think differently. Our mindset and our values are entirely different. And you should never attempt to teach an Asian person our values or presume that your way of living is the only true one. That's simply one possible version of reality. In my opinion, it's not even the best version, but the Asians won't understand you and you won't understand them. You simply have to accept it and have figured out the rules. Point number one is, of course, the classic misunderstandings, right? English is not your native language, I assume, but it's also not the native language of the Asian person. And when the Asian person says yes, that doesn't mean they're agreeing with you. It may simply mean that they understood what you said, and they might not even go along with it at all. But because of their culture, they can't just confront you about it directly. He just doesn't speak as directly as is usually the case in German. Like, hey, you idiot, you did it wrong. If you were to say something like that to someone in Asia, which you might get away with in Germany, well, with the younger generation, the first tears might already start flowing. But regular business people can usually handle it pretty well. Asians can handle it too, but in their own way, by simply not speaking to you anymore. If you behave inappropriately, you're out of the game. They will ignore you. It doesn't matter at all whether you've already placed your order or are still waiting for goods. You're out simply because you can't behave yourself. And if you can't behave yourself, then you don't deserve to be supplied by the manufacturer. You understand the system. So please make sure you stick to it. I mean, you can certainly try it your way, but then you'll pay a bit of tuition money. Then you'll remember this video you watched, and maybe next time you'll behave differently. Because if there are misunderstandings, as I already mentioned, you might end up with no supplier at all, or there will be delays because you'll have to beg and plead, and maybe even fly to China yourself to smooth things over with the Asian supplier and apologize for everything. So behave yourself, proceed in a structured way, and make sure to get everything confirmed in writing. This isn't about control, it's simply a way to underline your professionalism. If you confirm everything once by email and say, Mr. Wong, we just discussed this and that, bam, 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 bam. If something isn't correct, just send a quick note with the correction and you're safe. And Mr. Wong knows, okay, hey, this guy is professional, I can't play games with him, he knows exactly what he's doing. And that's already a plus point for you. And that brings us to the last mistake, namely risk management. We all still believe in Santa Claus and think that everything will go smoothly. As long as we behave properly, have enough money, and use a DE email address because we're German, then everyone has to follow our lead, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case, okay? And especially in this case, in risk management, you also have to take on your responsibility as managing director and make provisions. What many people do, and that's the problem, is that they only have a single manufacturer for their best-selling product. And of course, that's very risky. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's also an English version of this saying, and it's proven to be true. Especially for your best sellers, you always need to have a backup supplier who can at least produce the same quality. It's a bit difficult, especially when you're just starting out and have small order quantities, and then you also split them between two suppliers. That won't be enough for most manufacturers to take you seriously as a customer. But you have to make sure that you get out of this dependency as quickly as possible. Maybe for the first 2 or 3 productions, you'll only have one supplier, but once you're generating significant sales, you should make sure to diversify as quickly as possible and find a backup supplier. There are 2 reasons for this. If your supplier is ever unable to deliver, perhaps because they've reached their capacity limits, you can immediately switch over. You can also use your backup supplier as a price reference and see, okay, maybe my main supplier is overcharging me right now. Yes, maybe I can put some pressure on them and simply have my production done elsewhere. Or, as we know from the current political situation, sometimes countries are suddenly boycotted. For example, right now with China. Our customers at Asiapro are now often requesting an alternative country. Yes, so please find me this power bank, but not produced in China, somewhere else instead. In this case, probably Vietnam. And of course, we're present there as well, yes? Asiapro is in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, of course, China, and even the Philippines. We've already started to make our first contacts there. And if you don't have a plan B, no backup supplier, just imagine you place your order with your favorite supplier and they tell you, I'm sorry, but our capacity is maxed out. Yes, Aldi just placed an order. We can't produce anything for you in the next 6 months. Crying about it won't help either. Then you're just out of luck. You are fully accountable for your due diligence and for your strategic foresight in your company. To anticipate exactly these kinds of things and to have proactively addressed and resolved them well in advance. You can only do that with a backup supplier, ideally from another country. Yes, if that country is boycotted, you can go to your backup supplier. If the factory itself isn't working, you can still go to your backup supplier. They just happen to be from another country. It's not that difficult, everything works. If you're not particularly knowledgeable about this, you can find experts everywhere. Yes, there are a lot of freight forwarders who also ship from Vietnam. If you need help with that, here's a link to Asiapro. We're extremely competent when it comes to this. So once again, you need multiple suppliers to spread the risk. Ideally, they should be geographically distributed. So not China, but for example, China and Vietnam. And you need to have established processes, because as soon as one supplier cancels on you, you need to be able to immediately switch to process number 2 and contact your second supplier. And if you want to be really smart about it, even have a third supplier. So let's recap, in case you skipped ahead, which I hope you didn't. So the first point is find a qualified supplier. Point number 2, define the specifications very precisely. Otherwise, the manufacturer won't even know what they're supposed to produce for you. Then build in a check, meaning a quality inspection. Ideally at the beginning, in the middle of production, and very importantly, right at the end before you release the final payment. From now on, communicate properly with your Asian supplier, treating them as an equal culturally. You're not Mr. Germany who calls the shots. Those days are long gone, and the Asians know that too. So don't come at me with that attitude. And of course, at the very end, your crisis management. Build up alternatives so your business doesn't collapse just because one of your manufacturers catches a cold and can't produce. So those were the 5 most important and, above all, most expensive mistakes you can make in Asia. And from now on, you won't run the risk of losing hundreds of thousands of euros there. Please let me know down in the comments how you usually deal with your Asian suppliers, and I will see you in the next video. Adios!